Hello and welcome to the Global Dialogue. I'm Shireen Bhan, and today we're in conversation with the global CEO of Hitachi Energy, who's found his way back to India for the inauguration of their new plant in Bengaluru. Claudio, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here. The last time we spoke was in Davos, and it's good to see you here in India. Let's start with that, Claudio. You were here to inaugurate your new plant in Bangalore. Take me through the strategic importance of India, especially in the global context, for Hitachi Energy today.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. It's great to be back, and it's great to be back also, in a more kind of a normal engagement with meeting people, customers, partners, and it was an opportunity for me to participate in the opening of this important factory. It's yet another step for us to make sure that everything that is needed from an energy transition standpoint on the technology side, and particularly when it comes to the grids and how to manage the power quality, how to manage those resources, renewable resources particularly, deliver the electricity at the quality, at the location, and at the time that is needed, with more and more electrification coming on board with electrical vehicles, with industries electrifying to clean up the processes as well. All of that, it's at the center of what we do now in this new factory, which is power quality products and components and systems, all the way from low voltage to ultra high voltage. It's great that we have all those competence here in India as well. And the importance of the market in India, everyone of course sees the importance and the relevance because of the size, because of the growth opportunity, because also of the competitiveness of this market. But for us, it's even more important strategically to support the global growth. We have, out of 40,000 people that we have globally, 5,500 are here, and about half of those are supporting the global growth from an engineering center standpoint, from a manufacturing capacity standpoint as well. And what is also very important for us is that in this energy transition, India understands well all the components, not only the generation side with renewables, with future of hydrogen, hopefully green hydrogen, electrifying the demand, but also understanding what the grid needs to, how the grid needs to evolve in order to cope with that complexity.
So let me link those two aspects. One, the growth story that you spoke of, and then the energy transition. What's the sense that you get from your team here in India about the kind of opportunities that you see along the road? What is the order book position at this point in time? How strong is it looking for you? What's the visibility?
So the pipeline is strong. It's strong in India as it is strong globally. As I share with my team, I've been in this part of the space for a couple of decades. I've never seen such a strong, consistent tailwinds from a demand standpoint, all driven by the same rationale, by the same purpose of addressing that carbon footprint and driving that energy transition and accelerating even that energy transition. So across the portfolio that we have, we are now seeing good tailwinds across also the markets, and certainly India, it's one of those. At the same time, we all know that we also are facing quite some headwinds on the supply side that we need to also focus on to manage, mitigate those risks, long lead times, and so on. But altogether, the combination of, once again, that mid to long-term perspective of having the commitment from countries like India to deliver that net zero, and our commitment from an innovation standpoint, from a technology provider standpoint, to really help partnering with our customers, with all the stakeholders, to help accelerating that deployment.
One of the concerns, and you spoke about some of the supply shocks that the market is facing today. And I remember we spoke about this as a concern when we were in Davos as well, on account of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. 6 months and the war continues now. And that is impacting the way that Europe consumes energy. Who would have thought that we would see coal coming back on stream? But that is a reality, at least in the short to medium term, that one is having to contend with. How do you see this impacting the transition? You said that so far there's been no impact on demand. But do you believe that at least in the short to medium term, this is going to derail things when we talk about the energy transition?
It might. In one or the other occasion, it might delay decisions on investments. Some of the players will have to reprioritize to address the short term. And of course, the short term in certain cases might be how do we go through the winter? And that, of course, is something that from a social perspective needs to be the priority, making sure that everyone has what it takes to go through that. That said, I don't see anyone deviating from the long-term goal. And if anything, particularly in Europe, there is a clear, cohesive view and consistent approach and messaging across the industry, also through the stakeholders, government, that we should not jeopardize that journey that we're in to decarbonize the energy system because of the short term. We'll have to manage priority on the short term, but the long term remains intact.
Absolutely, and I think what is very evident, whether it's Europe or the US or of course even India, the impact of climate change is visible and is evident for all to see. But I just want to stress a little bit more on the short to medium term. And you said that this is going to be something that governments, policymakers, organizations like yours will need to manage. Now, what does that mean in terms of changes? Anything specific that you're doing differently to be able to mitigate the risks and the challenges that come up in the short to medium term, especially through this winter that is approaching?
Yeah, absolutely. One concrete example is, for instance, in our supply chain, some of these shortages that we are facing in terms of electronic components, whether it's microcontrollers, microchips, and so on. We used to get them through a supply chain that was well equipped to manage that. Nowadays, we have to go 2, 3, 4 tiers down in that supply chain to understand, first of all, that those suppliers understand what the critical part that is in this overall mission critical infrastructure system, like for instance protecting a power transmission line, and then making sure that priorities are also set accordingly. So of course that was a learning. It was a learning for us, but it was also a learning for the supply chain in that respect, and it's a learning that we're going through as an industry. So very important in these cases, which is of course it's also crisis management in some of those instances, is the collaboration. So as much as I've been communicating also during our events in Davos that there is no way that we can address this, the scale and the speed that we need to deliver those commitments on net zero if we work the way we used to work in the past as silos. We have to be able to collaborate horizontally, and even more so now to manage this crisis. So as an industry, we need to look at this cohesively. We need to look at what is it that we can do entirely as an industry to navigate through the short term and then take those learnings to hopefully accelerate even further the long-term commitment that we have on decarbonizing.
Right. Let's move back to India then and talk about the Hitachi Energy ecosystem. You talked about this new facility that you've set up with an investment of about 100 crore rupees, I'm given to understand. You have the facility in Chennai, which is supporting your engineering services as well. So 5,500 people is what you currently have. Given the opportunity that you see here in India, not just to address the domestic market, but for India to be able to address global growth and global demand for you, what kind of future investments will you need to make?
Well, for sure, we will continue to look at investments to localize further. Roughly, if you look at the entire portfolio that we have globally as Hitachi Energy, 80% is already localized. The last step in that was what we inaugurated yesterday on the power quality. But of course, there are other parts of the portfolio and technology that we continue to invest on globally. And because, as I was saying before, India, it is today already a central part of our global strategy, but even more so looking at what we need to deliver for that energy transition, for that technology to be deployed, India will become even more important in that role, playing a role to help supporting this growth on global scale. We're looking at what is it that we do today to make that 80%, maybe 100%, but also expanding around that portfolio, expanding, as I call it, at the edge of our core, which is the grid, because we need to better understand the needs of our customers when they electrify transportation, when they electrify their processes on the industry side. We need to better understand also these complementary sources of energy, clean energy, such as hydrogen. And we're working on that globally, but certainly looking more and more into how India can contribute to that global growth and that transition.
So what would the opportunities on the edge of the grid look like for you here in India? And you spoke about some of the emerging technologies. I mean, India has also launched a green hydrogen mission. We've got the first installment of that being released by the government. There are several large conglomerates who've already put together their plans of entering this space. Are you in active conversation with anybody here in India to take the green hydrogen story forward?
We have announced just recently a partnership and signing a memorandum of understanding in Europe in a venture, H2 Green Steel, that will develop technology leveraging green hydrogen to produce green steel. And of course, we're there not for the process of the hydrogen nor for the producing steel. That's not our core competence, but our core competence is to make sure that we understand what we need to do to integrate that generation and that production into this electrical energy system of the future. And then, of course, we took that first step in Europe, but we're looking forward to expand that. And there is no doubt that in India, all those components are being looked at, but also factored in terms of commitments, investments from the government, from all the industry, and we certainly want to be part of that. But again, thinking about India as part of this entire global opportunity.
We'll end to a short break and return with our conversation with the Global CEO of Hitachi Energy on the Global Dialogue.
There are those who are always looking for what's next.